Hello, everyone. I'm ZHAO Chuang. Today, we will draw the head of Torosaurus. The biggest feature of the head of Torosaurus is that it had an oversized head frill. Apart from the head frill, at a first glance, Torosaurus looked very much like a Triceratops, but they actually had many subtle differences. Some Torosaurus had small spiked nasal horns, but most of them have relatively flat and big triangular ones, in a shape more like the bone plates of Stegosaurus. In the past, our speculations on its head were often based on imagination, because at that time, the fossils of its head we found were incomplete, so in the old reconstructed images, its face was very short and the rear of its head frill was very long. Now the complete specimens show that its face, especially its mouth, was actually very long. In addition, its head frill had two big holes, which might have some bright patterns on it. Let's now draw its head. Its head was extremely huge, so before starting, let's determine its approximate position on the paper. It had a very big head frill. In the past, the fossils we found were not complete, and people thought its face was very short. Therefore, in the previously restored images, its face was quite round. But now, according to the relatively complete fossils discovered in recent years, we know that its face was very long, and the ratio of the head frill to the face was about 1:1. Torosaurus had very long horns, probably this long. In bigger specimens, the horns are over 1 meter long. It had very long and narrow face. We draw it with its head down and its horns facing forward. It had very special nasal horn. The nasal horns of many Torosaurus were nearly triangular and very far back on their faces, which was very different from Triceratops. After determining the position, we draw the details of its various parts. Let's draw its eyes. Its eyes were at the base of its horns, similar to Triceratops. We can draw its eyes relatively round, with small pupils. Around its eyes, there's a relatively soft skin texture, the outer side of which was connected to a circle of ring-shaped, relatively firm and protective keratinous structures. Extending forward from the eye sockets were its brow horns. Its brow horns grew downward, and the length was generally shorter than that of Triceratops. This is the brow horn on the other side. Under its brow horns, there's actually a groove, which is very special, and we can highlight it. From this angle, we can slightly see the raised eye socket on the other side. Then, we draw its nasal bone. Next is its nasal horn. Its nasal horn was very special, very different from Triceratops. According to many specimens, its nasal horn was shaped like a big and relatively flat triangular shark fin. Let's continue to draw its mouth. its mouth tilted downward, similar to a parrot's. But not hooked upward like that of many other ceratopsians. Its beak was relatively straight. It had big nostrils, about this big. The openings of its nostrils were a bit downward, close to its mouth. We can draw some wrinkles to show the soft skin texture. Its parrot-like mouth had a small tip at the front and a wider rear. Pay attention to its beak, stop right here, and then connect it upward. The shape of its beak was rather special. When its mouth was closed, the lower beak and upper beak could fit perfectly, and the front end of the lower jaw was also beak-like. With current anatomical techniques, we found that animals with relatively big mouth, such as Torosaurus and Triceratops, have soft skin textures above and below their mouth. Let's simply draw the corners of the mouth. It had relatively sharp cheekbones, the ends of which are covered with keratins. Then, we complete its lower jaw. Close to the cheeks, we draw its full muscles. Now we draw its head frill upward. Let's start from the middle of its head frill, such as the middle of its parietal bone. Its head frill was very big and extended very straightly back. The top of the head frill was divided into two halves. The top was relatively flat, and the middle was slightly concave. We draw the shape of the head frill with lighter strokes. Along the back of its horns, and up the dorsal side, there were two bulges that formed the boundary between the parietal and squamosal bones. The squamosal bones on the sides went all the way down and had a very strong hook near the face. Then, there's a sharp horn bulge downward. Its ears are in this position. Starting from the squamosal bone, we extend the line across the ear and connect it to the cheekbone. Then, the shape of its head frill is roughly completed. Next is the edge of the head frill. The top of its head frill was nearly heart-shaped, surrounded by a lot of flat ruffled edges, like most ceratopsians. There were many ornaments on the edges of its head frill, but the ornaments of Torosaurus were significantly flatter. And the last one was sharper. Then we draw the other side. Which is basically pretty flat. Now, we draw its keratins, and the edges of the skin. Behind its eyes are some large bulges. When it was alive, there were probably regularly arranged large scales in rows. Let's draw this part. In this position of the head frill, there were two big holes. When it was alive, this place was filled with soft tissue. Let's draw the soft tissue here. Finally, at the base of this horn, we can draw some growth lines. Good, like this, we've finished drawing the head of Torosaurus.